Okay, fellas, ladies, it's just a little video. It disturbs the shit out of me that people don't want to go out and do any work. Now, what the hell am I talking about? You're thinking to yourself, well, I'm talking about when it comes to radios and antennas for big trucks, cars, pickups, vans, whatever. Nobody wants to do the work. They'll go to forums. I'm going to use the Stryker website or the Stryker forum on Facebook as an example. I see it time and time and time again. Oh, I'm a new driver, and whether they are or not, nobody knows. And I can't get my SWR down. You know what they did? They went and bought some stuff. They hooked it up. Don't know what the hell they're doing, and they can't figure it out because they don't know. They haven't looked anything up. So immediately they go right to a forum and say, "Hey, how do I do this?" Because they want somebody to do the goddamn work for them. If you don't want to do the work for yourself and learn in the process, pack that shit up, put it in a box, and give it to whoever wants it. Because you got to do the goddamn work. That's all there is to it. You got to do the work. You got to go learn stuff. Teach yourself something. And then once you've exhausted every avenue there, then you go and ask a question to the people who are more experienced. I'm not a technician by no means. I don't claim to be the smartest man in the world. I don't claim to know all this shit. But I do know enough to get myself in trouble, so to speak. So here's a couple little things. If you can't get your SWR down, look at what you bought. Did you buy any diagnostic tools whatsoever? Probably not. Just hooked it up to your Cobra 29, keyed up the button. Holy geez, SWR is pinned on all of my channels. Well, why? Oh, I'm going to go over to the Stryker website or the Cobra 29 website or whatever it is. I'm going to ask somebody. Did you learn anything? Did you look anything up? No, you didn't. Because right off the get-go, the things that will make a difference is what antenna did you choose? How long is that antenna? What coax did you buy? How did you route the coax? What antenna stud did you buy? Did you buy a cheap one? Are you trying to save a buck? It don't work that way. Where is your antenna mounted? You can't mount the antenna for shits and giggles. You can't mount it to your step and expect to pick up signals because you got all a big truck. We're going to use a big truck as an 18-wheeler for an example. If you mount it to the metal step, well, geez, that's not going to pick up nothing but noise. Well, I can't, man, my coax is all hooked up to it. I can't get my SWR. Once again, like I said, you didn't study. You didn't go do anything. When you went to school, your teachers taught you how to do math. They taught you geography. They taught you different sciences. You were taught to walk when you were a baby. You were taught to speak. It's the same thing with CB radios and antennas. You got to teach yourself the majority of the stuff. That's the basics. Basics being, for one antenna, which I suggest, versus two, you need a 50 ohm coax. For two antennas, you need a 75 ohm coax. Two different coaxes. You can't take one CB antenna and hook it up to a 75 ohm coax and not have an antenna on the other side. It's just not going to work for you. So don't do stupid shit like that. Don't go out and buy one of these little T's, I guess you call it, that have two female ends or two male ends and one female, or how is it? Two female ends and one male end. Hook it up to your radio with two different coaxes. It ain't gonna work. So you got to do your own studies. You got to look up stuff. Don't just go to a website and say, "Hey, I can't do this or I can't do that. Go out there and exhaust every forum. Do lots of reading. Buy books from the AARL or ARRL, whatever it is. Watch some videos. Learn how to do some of the basic shit so that you kind of learn as you go. For example, your coax. Don't pinch it in a door. Don't run it through a door. Don't run it through the window. Close the window on it 1,500 times and in a 2-week period, and all of a sudden, oh, my SWR's gone skyrocket high. I can't figure it out. Well, it's because you're a dumbass. You haven't learned anything yet. You want to do the quick, fast way to get it done right, to get it done so you can get out. Don't. Take your time. Learn something. Take the time and route the coax so that it doesn't rub through the casing on your route. Make sure it doesn't rub up against stuff. And if it does have a tendency to rub on a little bit of stuff, use some wire looming to cover up the coax. Save that coax. Same thing with the power wires to the radio. Don't just hook it up to the manufacturer's wire harness, because you're going to probably get tons of electronic noise. You're going to do it? Hook it up to the batteries. The longer you go, the thicker cabling you're going to need to power that radio. Antenna stud. Your choice of antenna studs, that makes a difference. Where you mount that antenna is going to make a difference. There's so many differences. Take the time. If you're going to spend the money on even a cheap radio and a cheap antenna and cheap coax, take the time to do a bit of research and see what's out there, see what's available, and make your choices based on that. Don't scrimp and save, because what you buy will make a difference in how far you get out or don't get out. It all makes a difference. So whatever you do, don't scrimp. I'm not telling you to buy the most expensive radio, not telling you to buy the most expensive antenna, not telling you to buy the most expensive coax either. Look up some quality gear. You'll get to learn what's junk and what's not. Look up recommendations, watch YouTube videos, buy books, learn some stuff. Anyway, too many people are just too quick to jump on a forum and say, hey, I can't do this or I can't do that. Well, you want answers from us? You're going to have to go out and teach yourself something. You don't lay out a blanket statement and say, I can't get my SWR down. There's so many variables. Were you parked next to a building? Did you buy cheap coax? Did you buy the wrong coax? Same thing with a stud. Did you buy a cheap stud? Is it an older stud? Is there corrosion somewhere in your mounting solution? How did you mount it? Where did you mount it? It all makes a difference. So go bone up on that stuff first before you start asking questions. If you can't ask the right question, then you come into a forum and ask somebody a question who may direct you to a better place to go, to study, to read. You know, you say, well, I bought a brand new coax, I bought a brand new antenna, got a brand new CB, but you still haven't told us how and where and what it's mounted to, and you know, your antenna mount, if that's mounted on a painted surface, that's a problem right there. Cheap studs, well, that's another problem that's going to show itself pretty soon. Coax, yeah, that's just going to be a lot of loss. Now, you can't get your SWR down because of a few basic things. One, like I said, how the antenna stud is mounted, or the antenna bracket is mounted, where it's mounted, what it's mounted to, that all plays a role. I lost track of what I was going to say. Crap. Brain farting. Okay, so anyway, your antenna choice. If your mirror arm, we'll say, like on this Volvo, for example, if your mirror arm mounting point is going to be down here, you don't want a base load antenna. You don't even want a mid load antenna. Base load is when you get the little coil that's on a magnet, for example, that just sits right on top of the magnet. Mid-load antenna is when you get a shaft, a coil of some sorts, like a Predator 10K, a Wilson 2000, 5000, that type of idea, or I'm drawing a blank on other brands now. Monkey Made, same idea. That's called a mid-load. That's or you can go with a top-load fiberglass antenna. They're more flexible. They're a little bit harder to deal with when it gets to be windy and rainy because they flex. That's going to be another subject in itself. But they're a top-load antenna. You get the best range with a top-load antenna. Especially if you have a low-mount solution, like on a Cascadia. This is a Volvo, like I said. But if you have a low-mount solution like that, you want a tall antenna. Now, on a Volvo, the antennas are up like that. So the antenna is shorter, and it's got a coil up towards the top. All the little lines of wire. That's considered a top load. You're going to get the most range for something like that. Now, there's always going to be the exception to the rule. I'm fully aware of it. For example, you're not going to put 1,000 watts through a fiberglass antenna because you're going to melt that shit. So then your solution is what? Do I go with a mid-load antenna? Do I go with a 102? That's your choice. Once again, where you mount it is going to be a factor. That's also going to play a role in your SWR. But your antenna, for example, like we'll use Cascadia again. If your antenna is mounted down here, it doesn't have that metal surface as your ground plane, or the closest thing we have is a ground plane. Here's an idea. See how my USB is plugged into that socket? Well, my dash would be considered the ground plane, and the antenna, which would be, or the USB wiring for my charging my phone here, would be your antenna. We'll just assume it's completely straight up. There, let's do this. Okay. That's basically what you want your antenna to be doing. So the dash here would be considered your ground plane. Your antenna straight up. So now it's going to do what it's got to do. Now, if you don't have that ground plane, well then, you know, you're suffering. It's suffering. Your antenna range, your antenna performance is going to suffer. And you're going to see that on the radio when you key up and your SWR is not right. Don't get caught up in the SWR shit. Don't get caught up. If you got a 1.2 and somebody else got a 1.5, yours is not much better than the other guy. It's like pissing in a pond and expecting it to see the rise. It is squat. SWR has no bearing on actual antenna performance. Zero. All it is, it's the match between your antenna to the radio. That's all it is. There's no magic length of coax that's going to solve that, because if coax length solves your SWR, you've got issues somewhere else. So figure that out. The coax you need, quality coax, of course. There's different brands out there. You do your own research. I'm not going to do it for you. And how that PL259 end is connected to that coax. If it's a crimp on, chances are it's not going to last. It's going to be crap. It's going to get wet. It's going to get corroded. Junk. Then you're right back to where you started. So anyway, the antenna needs a base to work off of. On a big truck, we don't have that base. On the roof of a car or a van, that's your ground plane. But you're also going to have to do what's called bonding. Bonding is when you take wide braided straps, the wider the better, and connect 2 points. We're going to use a door hinge as an example. A door hinge connects the door to the cab. Yep, that's exactly what it does. But in between that hinge, somewhere along the line, whether it's the bolts to the hinges themselves, there's going to be something that's going to affect a clear RF travel. Stuff like a plastic sheath, I guess, on the bolt where it goes through the door. It could be something like a little thread lock would make a difference. The hinge itself could have some plastic in it to stop corrosion in the pivot point of the hinge. That can affect your readings. So the wide braided straps you're using to connect, just as the door as an example, connect one side of the hinge to the other side of the hinge, which is the door to the cab. You have to do that in multiple places across the vehicle. You do both doors, you do the frame to the body, all metal pieces now. You don't connect fiberglass to metal because it's going to do absolutely nothing. But it has to be metal to metal throughout the vehicle that you're doing it to. That's called bonding. People call it grounding, but it's the principle. Yeah, use as many straps as needed to do the front, the back, both sides equally. So that bond goes all the way around that vehicle. Because RF starts here at the antenna, needs to go all the way around and come back to that starting point. It doesn't just do this. That's not all it does. Now, if you've got a poor bond, like we'll say on the back rack of a truck, it's got to go from here into the truck cab and find its way to the truck box and then into the railing or the whatever they call it, the back rack or something of the back rack that's on your truck, and then go across all the different metal pieces to the antenna, and then it's going to backtrack all the way through all that. So what you want to do is you want to create one big huge pattern so that you have a bunch of different bond straps connecting as many metal pieces of that vehicle together so that it acts like a big old racetrack. Something about SWR too, something else about SWR, sorry, is people say, oh, I've got a 1.5 or a 1.2 or whatever it is across the entire band. And they think that's cat's meow. It's not. That means you've got a lot of loss somewhere. And it'll be seen to a degree if you look at a graph from an analyzer. For an example, an analyzer graph is going to say, okay, your frequency begins at, we'll say, right here, and there's another frequency here. So that's your 40 channels. So you start off at a 1.5, we'll say, then it comes down to your center channel, which is, we'll say, is 19. And that's where your best SWR is, and it's going to start climbing again until it reaches up here on channel 40. So if you got the same across, you got something going on there. But if you got the big V pattern, well, then you know that your center frequency is the tuned frequency of whatever you're tuned your antenna to. You can move that up and down however you like. If you want to talk the most on channel 40, then you can tune that antenna to be the most effective on channel 40, so that your dip will be just moved over in the frequency band. And SWR will change with frequency. It's never going to be the same frequency all along. It's never going to be. Your antenna, when you're driving on the road, that antenna, we're going to use a 102 as an example. That 102 is going to be a 102 inch no matter how you look at it, in a physical aspect. In a radio world, when you're driving down the road, that antenna bends back, we'll say 20 degrees. Now your antenna electrically has changed length, so it's going to mess with your tune a little bit. So it's better off to tune or take notes on what your SWR is while driving versus sitting still. In a parking lot, yeah, you're going to have a great, but as soon as you get out of the parking lot, start driving down the road, that antenna bends no matter what it is. Your SWR is going to climb or it's going to fall depending on how you tuned it. Probably going to climb. So you got to keep that in mind too. What else? So basically, what your antenna is mounted to, the stud that you use makes a difference. Can't mount it to a painted surface and expect a good connection. It's just like anything else. Can't use cheap coax and cheap truck stop meters. You don't need a meter in line all the time. That's a personal preference of people. I'm not going to fault anybody for it, but it will affect your output and your tune, because that antenna tune is going to be seen not from the radio anymore. It's going to be seen from the your little meter that you bought to put in line to the antenna. That could also affect your SWR and other things, because now you've put a different piece of coax at a different length in there with different parameters in line, and that will affect your SWR. Your antenna or your SWR reading is no longer coming from the antenna to the radio. It's coming from the antenna to the SWR meter that you've put in line. If you eliminate that altogether, your radio is still only going to see from the back of the radio. That measurement is taken from the back of the radio. It's not taken from the antenna. If you want a true reading of what your antenna is, there's some graphs on the AARL or ARRL booklets that you can find. If you go buy a book, do some reading, you'll see the graphs. But what your radio shows you is not necessarily, because you could have so much loss elsewhere that will mess with your SWR reading. Sorry. So don't get caught up in SWR thinking that your cat's meow if your SWR is low. Don't get caught up on it at all. There's too many factors that are going to screw everything up. Anyway, I rambled on enough. Do yourself a favor. Teach yourself some stuff on how to set up your radio. Don't go out and buy a $500 or $1,000 radio thinking it's cat's ass, and buy a little 3-foot fiberglass antenna and some cheap truck stop gear to mount the antenna and cheap coax, because you're going to do more harm than good. If you're going to do anything, buy a Cobra 29 and spend some money on a good coax, a good stud, and a good antenna, and you'll do better than somebody who spent a whack a coin on a big radio and an amp. I've seen guys out there with amps on big radios, or even a little radio, medium-sized radio, and they put a big amp behind it, and you don't get no more than 10, 15. Here's a perfect example. I was running down the road with a number of guys at one point in time, stateside, when I used to run states, and this guy passed by, and he was all mouth. Holy Jesus, radio was loud as loud can get. You even have to turn down the radio. He was running a Predator 30K and a, what was it, the Sweet 16 amp. I forget what radio was done to. And in about 10 miles or so, he was gone. Nobody could hear him. The guys that I was traveling with at the time, nobody else could hear him. I couldn't hear him. So just because you got big expensive gear doesn't mean shit. You got to have the antenna set up right. That's the most important thing. So first thing you do when you go out and you buy yourself an antenna, pick the right antenna for the vehicle you're doing. Don't scrimp on coax and stud. Make sure the surfaces are clean, paint free when you mount your antenna. Use dielectric grease so that you don't get corrosions and stuff at different points. Be it your antenna, if you buy a coiled antenna. Same thing with your coax. You know, wherever there's a connection point, put a little bit of that grease. What else? Don't pinch your coax in the doors and the windows. Take the time to go study. It'll save you a fortune. It'll suck because it's going to take time to pick up on this stuff. I bought a couple of books. I bought the big Bible from AARL or ARRL. I don't know how many times I've picked it up and thrown it down pissed off because I don't understand half the shit that's into it. Now, people who have an electronics background will understand it. I don't have an electronics background, so I don't understand most of it. But as I learn something from another source that puts the same issues a different way, I pick up on it. Then I can go back to the ARL, understand what they're telling me. So it's worth every penny to go out and buy a book, even if you don't understand it today. I bought a couple of more books a few months back. At first, when I opened up, it was all like trying to read Japanese, but now some of this stuff is making sense because I'm understanding it a different way than what they're putting it. So it's worthwhile to go get a book. Buy 2. Just figure out what it is that you need it for. Anyway, study, study, study. Apply what you've learned, and if it still doesn't work, well, then you ask questions. But don't just go to a forum and say, hey, I just bought this new radio, and I bought this new antenna, and I bought this new stud and coax and everything hooked up, and I can't get the SWR down. Take lots of pictures. Detailed pictures of how the antenna is mounted, how the stud is mounted to the bracket, how the bracket is mounted to the mount point, where that mount point is, and how you route your coax, what coax you bought, all that stuff. Take plenty of pictures so that you'll have information for somebody else to help you figure out what the problem is. Once you got that done, then you'll start learning. You'll pick up quickly. Anyway, it's enough rambling. I'm going to go home, have a nap, have some breakfast, start my weekend. Later.